What to you makes a fighting game complex other than just intense combos or very, very hard to execute combos? We know games like Guilty Gear and KOF 13 or just kind of KOF in general. They're really known for having very, very complex combos. So people say they're like complex games. But are there any other attributes about a fighting game that could make it complex? Starting with you, Mr. Game and Live. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, there's quite a few actually. Besides just execution for games, there's a lot of stuff that is intense because um, I know I once saw something where there's probably the most popular FGC combo artist out there. I think he even talked about people like, man, why don't he compete? Why doesn't he play in these tournaments? And it's like, well, I think even he said he's like, I'm decent and I just have I have this skill for what I do, but it's like that doesn't necessarily translate into like a good player. Like it's more than just being able to, like, if I hit you, I could kill you, but it's like I have to get to the hit. So footsies is one thing that makes fighting games complex, like knowing what to throw out, knowing what not to throw out, when and where, knowing like, you know, having a good guesstimate or thinking of when your opponent's going to throw something out with punishing. We get frame data. That's one. We can just go into that. I'm just going to mention. I'm not going to go into it, but frame data. Um, Certain things, the hit boxes, hurt boxes. There's a lot of things that go into it. Movement is actually really one I don't think a lot of people put enough emphasis on. I love characters with like really high movement, and even characters that don't have like crazy movement. You still got to know how to move. Tekken is probably one of the biggest examples of movement. Tekken and like Marvel, like you got to be able to know like how to move, and if you can't move efficiently, and your opponent can, they have an advantage over you. Marvel 3, like a character that has flight and they can like dash in the air. What we saw at the end of Marvel 3's competitive run, people flight in the air and then they plink dash across the screen to get away from like Morgan's bullet hell shooting all over the screen type thing. Um, so you gotta know how to move, and you gotta know how to defend. So it's a lot of things that go into a game that make it difficult outside of just the execution. Because you can not have the best execution, but if you have fairly decent decision making and you can like you know not only decision making but like persuasion even, and when I say persuasion I mean the fact that you can like bait somebody into doing something
Hmm.
like shimmy, and you walk up and let's say in conditioning, so all that kind of goes hand in hand. Like you walk up to somebody and throw them 2 times in a row, they just might think, oh, he's going to do it third time. And you walk up and then you back up a step and you counter hit him. So that type of stuff, being able, like, you don't need a lot of execution. Like, you can kill them just off doing those type of decisions. Now, when you do get a hit, it is in your best interest to, like, maximize on that hit and get the most damage that you can. But at the same time, just being able to do an infinite or something is not always necessary. Just being able to make those solid, good decisions, however often they happen in the match, being able to eliminate the times that you have to make good decisions. Like, so be like, as opposed to like, I got to make him guess right or wrong 10 times. How about I try to make the better decisions to make him guess wrong 7 times so he dies in less decisions. So stuff like that. I mean, that's a whole, I think, rabbit hole we can go into about these topics. But yeah, those are what I think make fighting games pretty complex just outside of the execution aspect.
You know, I definitely agree with pretty much everything Devin said right there, especially the issue of persuasion. One of the things that people talk about when, at least, but when I was playing Tekken, was the no mix up, where you do a move 4 times. When Devin was saying you do it twice, and they think, okay, they're gonna, you're kind of like tricking them, and they're like, okay, they're gonna do it again. So now I'm going to, and it's like, nah, they did a completely different move. But then of course on the other side, there's the no mix up, where and I do this all the time as Miguel when I'm if any of you guys know, the whole thing with Miguel is he has a savage stance, and there's a move he does, down back three, where he kicks you in the leg. And if you hold forward, he goes back into savage stance after he does it. So he's set up to do whatever he wants from savage stance after that. Now, what I would usually do, and I've done this several times, is I'll hit somebody in the leg and go into savage stance, and then I'll do it again. And then I'll do it again. 3 times in a row. Now, the other person is thinking, there is no way that this guy is going to do it 4 times in a row. It's just impossible. Who would do something like that? Me. I will do it 4 times in a row. I'm going to do it 4 times in a row to get the win. I will do it 4 times in a row. And if you're still alive, I might do it a 5th time just because. Now, they might block it, but you know, that's the risk you take. But in addition to that, there's also the implementation of super gauges that make the game a little bit more complex, because in addition to being able to do your moves, you can also do, in some cases, stronger versions, the EX versions of your moves. You can also do super moves. Of course, you have your super moves. There are also, in addition to stuff like that, you know, they have implemented mechanics like recently in Street Fighter V, they have the V shift. They have the V shift and the the V shift and the V reversal, I think it's called. Is that what it's called? The V reversal? And of course, that's in addition to all the other ways you could already use your V gauge in the first place. So that makes the game a lot bit deeper than it was before. Then of course you have the options, the different options that you can choose for your V skills and your V triggers, because there's 2 options for V skills and 2 options for V triggers. Then let's shift over to Soul Calibur for a minute. In Soul Calibur, you have the lethal hits. Lethal hits are moves that do a little bit more damage, but they also change the situation up a little bit. Normally, for instance, I'm just going to use what I know here. But as an Astaroth player, there's a move 22B. So for those of you who play Tekken, it would be down down. It would be down down 2. It would be down down 2. So he does this move where he swings upward and knocks people into the air. Now normally it's just a really damaging move that you can use to hit people, just to hurt. It hurts a lot, and he sidesteps a little bit while he's doing it. The thing about that is though, if you time it properly and you sidestep it and you make them whiff and you time it perfectly, you get a lethal hit off of that. Now normally they would knock them into the air and they go flying off and then they hit the ground and now they're up and now you're back to neutral. But if you do the lethal hit, that changes everything. Now it's when you hit them, it slows it down, so you know that you got a lethal hit. The background darkens, the camera zooms in, it goes in slow motion, like you know you got a lethal hit. So now there are several different options. You can do the obsidian drop. You can jump up, grab them, break them over your knee. You could just as easily do you could do another 22B when they hit the ground. Or I learned this very recently. If you're near a wall, you can wall combo them, or if they're near a low wall, you can just get them off the stage. There's so many different things just around that one move. It just changes everything, and that's one of the things that adds to the depth of a game. And like Devlin said, you have to be able to get to the point where you hit a person to be able to get that combo. And I remember watching when I started playing Tekken, Eris was doing a video about people who play fighting games. And the thing about people who play fighting games is when you're doing combos is, first off, you have to be able to do the combo in the first place. You got to be able to do the combo. Then you got to be able to recognize when it's time to do the combo. Then after that, you got to be able to do the combo when you're nervous. Because you're going to be nervous a lot when you're playing these games. You're going to be nervous. You're going to be sitting there and your hands are going to be sweaty and your fingers aren't doing exactly what you want them to do. So you got to be able to pull it off in that kind of situation. And it's tough. But when you get to that point, you realize that I can do this combo when the chips are down. And there's so many phases that you got to go through in order to get to the point where you're even doing combos in the first place, regardless of whether it's a simple or a complex combo. So I think even that, the whole process of getting to learn a combo and be able to perform it under duress is part of what makes a game a deep game. There's so much that goes into these modern games, these modern fighting games, Guilty Gear, Tekken, Street Fighter, Unist, all of these games that take all this stuff, all these different mechanics, gauges. In Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, there's cooldowns for your special moves. You know, there are cooldowns. So that's another thing that you just kind of add to it. that make the game more and more and more deeper. So I think, yeah, there are a lot of things that contribute to making the game a lot more deeper than just complex combos. And I think the further we go along, the more we'll be able to expand that. Um, I think that's what's really going to be great going forward is seeing how creative developers can get when it comes to all these other things within the game.
Um, both of what you guys said just is right on the money, and it just leads to my answer in just that fighting games is just a genre in itself that is just complex. Like that's just what it is. Like we're out of all the different games and stuff that we play, like fighting games are the most complex out of all of them. One thing that I've always thought with fighting games is just that, man, like with these games, there's so much you have to keep in mind when you're playing the game. Like there's so much that you have to know and that you have to like have in the back of your mind, always watching the screen and all this other stuff to just actually play the game. Like when you look at all these terminologies and stuff that's in games, like when you're playing these games, you legit have to know this stuff to be the best player that you can be. Like when people talk about stuff like baiting, teching, okies, mix-ups, and all this other stuff. Like you really have to know what this stuff is and be able to have it in the back of your mind, um, of what it is. So the possibility that you could do it in optimal situations, but also at the same time making sure that you know what it is because you're trying to make sure that your opponent is not setting you up in a position where you can get done by these things. And also at the same time, like with fighting games, you really, really have to know like fighting games is a genre where you can't just be like, I'm just worried about what I'm doing. Like I'm gonna study and pay attention to what I'm doing, and that's all I'm gonna need. When you can't do that, because like when you're playing fighting games, you have to know matchups. You have to know what your other opponents are doing. Like you have to know what these other characters are capable of. You can't be like, I play Ken, I play Ryu, and everybody else sucks. You just can't be like that. Like you have to know these other characters, or you're gonna find yourself in situations to where everything's a surprise for you, and you're just like, I didn't know that, I didn't know that, I didn't know. It's like you needed to know that. That's another. It's just so much to keep in mind with fighting. And then he touched on like you have gauges and critical arcs and all these different special types of things characters can do. Like it's like Arthur said on one of the older episodes. Could you imagine like a newbie getting into Capcom versus SNK2 and it's like 50 different gauges for you to choose from, and you really got to know like how to go into all those different ones to figure out what they can do, but also at the same time you got to know how each character utilizes each one for their own special uses and stuff like that to be able. And it's just like like hey bro, like I just came here to press some buttons and have a good time, to the point where fighting games could be like even games that we'll look at like the Naruto games, the Ninja Storms, they're more so arena fighters. But people would say like, oh man, those games are just smashing triangle and then hitting square, like. But even then, like you have to know like stuff in that genre to where it's like the the execution of the combos and stuff might be easy, but at the same time, like you have to know like what these different moves, what each character is doing, like the strategies that each character can does, how they can utilize different things, like making sure that you kind of know the game front and back to make sure you don't get caught in situations where people are doing something that you're just like, I have no idea what's going on, like what are they doing and stuff like that. So it's like, so like fighting games is one of the most like fighting games is like the chess of like all the different genres and stuff. Like it's just so much you have to keep them. It's so many mind games going on. It's so much you have to know. It's so much you have to be aware of. It's like you just have to if you want to be successful in it. So I just think fighting games are just innately complex. Even if you have like, yeah, the execution of combos can make it harder, but innately I just think fighting games is just a complex genre in general. So it's just the nature of the beast. So